A pack of elite enemies? No, I don't think so. Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, I've been playing a fair bit of Season 1 of the game so far, and my main character of choice is, of course, the Druid. I did my predictive leveling build of what I thought I'd be doing a couple of days ago, and I'm actually extremely happy with how well that turned out. It did wonders for me for quite a while. Then I switched to Pulverize just for a little bit around level 40, thanks to the aspect being in the codex, but then once I hit 50, I actually went back to the leveling build, modified it, upgraded it, and as it turns out, it is stronger than Pulverize. At the very least, it is when you are working with minimal Paragon board points, which means that this may not stay the case 10 to 15 levels from now, but at this stage, in the early 50s, this build is really damn good, letting me take out a tier 10 Nightmare dungeon at level 54 like it is nothing at all.
Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Nothing at all.
So of course I thought I would share this updated build and what makes it able to do what it does, because it's actually really quite fun and I want you guys to see it for yourself so you can decide if you'd like to try it out too. That said, let's go into all the skill points and where I've put them. This will not be done in order, as it is essentially just an upgraded version of my leveling build with changes dependent on a couple of legendaries, so if you're starting off really early, just go from that base build and move to here afterwards. After that, we will talk about spirit boons, of course, then legendary aspects that I've got going on, the Malignant Hearts that we are using, and what stats you want to aim for on your gear as a general concept, and then we'll go over the start of the Paragon board, as that's all I have so far, and then finally a couple of tips for how to play from my time with the build. Without further ado then, right into the skill points. Yes, of course, to start off with, for a basic skill, we are going for Storm Strike. We're also going to be taking Enhanced Storm Strike and then also Fierce Storm Strike. At the very least, until you get Exploit Glyph fully functional in Paragon, this is just our most reliable source of applying the vulnerable debuff, which is far too good to ignore. Not to mention that damage reduction on hit and also immobilize chance is also very useful for us. Then we move on to our core skill node cluster, and this is going to be surprisingly busy. We take 5 ranks into landslide itself, but no enhancements for the skill. The reason for this is that landslide is never actually on our action bar, but it is triggered by a legendary effect through Poison Creeper. When you cast landslide without it being on your bar, it interacts a little bit weirdly, and it simply doesn't take enhancements to the skill into effect, which in my opinion is mostly a bug because it needs to work that way to work properly, as Terramotes would obviously just be in this build if they worked properly, but they don't, so we don't have that. Instead, we just power up the pure ranks of the skill to 5 ranks and leave it at that for the extra damage. Then we take 5 ranks of Shred as well. This is our main actually used core skill in this build. Part of this is because at its heart, this is a poison build and it revolves around Shred for that. But also a big deal for us is speed of attacks, not necessarily literal attack speed, but Shred and Primal Shred also are added on here to gain attack speed and also a heal every time that you hit with it, and then also a 30% crit damage increase multiplier with the skill that also makes it so each part of the combo does a dash instead of only the one part by default. Then we take 3 ranks of Predatory Instincts as a passive for 6% increased crit chance against close enemies. Most, if not all, enemies will be close, we're dashing around with Shred, and crit chance is super important to the actual functionality of this build. Then in the next cluster we're going to be grabbing Earthen Bulwark, as well as this enhancement. Also we're going to be grabbing Preserving Earthen Bulwark. This gives us a defensive that applies a sizable barrier as well as a notable amount of Fortify, and you also get the Unstoppable buff while it is active, which is super important. Then we're also going to be grabbing Blood Howl, Enhanced Blood Howl, and also Innate Blood Howl. This gives you a defensive skill that heals you a good chunk, has its cooldown reduced by 1 second per kill that you get so that you can use it relatively frequently, and then it also gives you 20 spirit on each cast, which is a big deal because Druid before endgame really struggles a bit with spirit generation, so this helps a good amount, especially if you are racking up enough kills to activate it frequently. Then we're also going to be grabbing 1 rank in Ancestral Fortitude for 5% resistance increase, mostly just as a gateway though to get 3 ranks of Vigilance for a 15% overall damage reduction increase for 6 seconds after activating a defensive ability, of which we have 2, one of which with a quickly resetting cooldown, so this is actually active quite a lot. Then we're going to be moving down to our companion cluster, and we are taking all 5 ranks of Poison Creeper. This is a massive part of our damage. Our damage scales with poison, so this is a big deal. We also grab Enhanced Poison Creeper to increase the immobilized duration just a slight bit on the active ability, and then Brutal Poison Creeper. This is really important for a mid-game build. It increases your critical chance by a whopping 20% against enemies caught in Poison Creeper's active ability, which is nutty, especially when you do not have a full slate of gear that just has max rolled crit chance all over it. 20% is a ton, even more so early on. Then we also grab 3 ranks of Call of the Wild, which further increases the damage of Poison Creeper by another 30%. After that, we're going to be getting the Wrath Node Cluster, and here we are taking exclusively passives for now. I will say that I have some ideas to change to the build that incorporate a bit of a trample slide idea using the aspect of Trampled Earth, but I just haven't had that aspect drop for me yet, so we'll have to see how that goes when it happens. For now though, just passives. 3 ranks of Crushing Earth to increase earth damage against slowed, stunned, immobilized, or knocked back enemies, all of which we apply constantly. 3 ranks of Safeguard, so earth skill critical hits fortify us for 7% of our base health, which really does add up with the amount of landslides that are shot out. Then we want 3 ranks of Stone Guard for a 12% damage increase multiplier to earth skills when you have more than 50% of your health as fortified. After that, we take 1 rank of the Neurotoxin passive so that any poisoned enemies are also slowed, 3 ranks of Toxic Claws so that any critical hits with our wolf skills will also apply poison. Specifically, this is of course Shred, that's our only wolf skill that does damage. Then we also take 3 ranks of Envenom for a 30% crit damage increase multiplier against poisoned enemies with any of our skills. It says that it's additive in the tooltip, but this is still a multiplier even after the patch. Then for our ultimate, we are actually going to be taking Petrify. This is the skill that I think I would replace with Trample if I did so keep in mind that if you have the aspect that I'm missing and want to mess around with it, that's what you would move. This applies a stun to everything around you in a large radius for a few seconds. We are of course also taking the enhancement to it too, and so it makes enemies in the circle take 30% increased crit damage as a multiplier, 50% if they are bosses instead, and also Refund Spirit if you kill an enemy that is affected by this skill. Then finally for our key passive, we're going to be taking Lupine Ferocity for a guaranteed crit and damage boost every 6th werewolf skill that we cast, and because we only use Shred, that always actually lands it on our big combo finisher of Shred itself, as it's a 3-hit combo attack, which is a multiple of 6. This covers the skill tree then, so what about these Spirit Boons? In the Deer Path, we're of course going to be grabbing Wariness for 10% damage reduction from elites. This is pretty standard in the vast majority of builds, it's just really good and it's hard not to have. Then we're going to bond with the Deer Path so we can take 2 Spirit Boons here, the first of which being Scythe Talons for 5% increased critical chance. Again, crit chance is really important for us, and you'll find out exactly why it is in a moment. Our second boon here is Swooping Attacks for a 10% attack speed increase, because one of our main goals as well is to attack quickly. Then in the Wolf Path, this is the biggest, most important one, Pack Leader. This gives all critical hits a 20% lucky hit chance to reset your companion skill cooldowns. In our setup, Poison Creeper is a massive portion of our actual damage output, so essentially we focus both crit chance and attack speed in order to trigger this reset from this boon as often as physically possible so that we can massacre enemies with Poison Creeper itself. Then we have Boosted Shred for when it doesn't happen to proc, which still does really good damage. Then finally in our Snake Path, we're going to be grabbing Masochistic. This was nerfed recently to be a 75% lucky hit chance on shapeshifting critical strikes to heal for 3% health instead of being a guaranteed heal when you crit with them, but it's still really good, so of course we still take it. Moving on to our legendaries, I've got a 2-handed staff running for this build for increased damage to crowd controlled enemies, and on this staff is the Stormclaw aspect, which is a Codex aspect, so you can apply it pretty easily. I have it here for double power, and this makes critical hits with Shred do an AoE pop of damage around the target for up to 60% of its damage, which actually adds up to a ton of damage in combination with all of our synergies. On our amulet, we've got Aspect of the Blurred Beast, which makes it so when you dash with Shred, it applies up to 150% of their current poisoning damage of an enemy as bonus damage on the spot. This does not consume the poison, which is a really important point. It is just pure additional damage that stacks with all of our other things. It builds up with Toxic Claws if it crits. It's actually just really strong. And it of course means that Shred does a ton of damage right after you use Poison Creeper as a result, and that also feeds into the Stormclaw aspect. This is not a Codex aspect though, so you've got to try your luck with RNG. Your best bet of farming one if you really want it ASAP is to gamble obols at the Purveyor of Curiosities, specifically purchasing totems. They are only 40 cost and guaranteed to have offensive aspects if they do roll a legendary. Then you want the Subterranean aspect. This is the new one for Druid in Season 1, and it makes Poison Creeper cast Landslide in a circle around you, realistically enabling what this build actually is. The landslides do pretty solid damage in their own right, which is why we've boosted them, but the big bump that this gives us is that Landslide is a number of hits per cast. Poison Creeper casting a circle of them means a bunch of landslides on a group of enemies. Each of these has 20% boosted crit chance as well because of our Poison Creeper enhancement, which means that every time that you hit the Poison Creeper active in a group of enemies, you launch off a ton of hits in a fraction of a second, all of which with boosted crit chance, which gives you a really good chance of triggering Pack Leader to reset the cooldown of Poison Creeper so that you can do it all over again. On top of that, it gives you up to 20% bonus damage with Earth skills against poisoned enemies. This aspect is unlocked for your Codex after you complete Chapter 1 of the season journey, which is quite easy to accomplish. Then we have the aspect of Aftershock. This one is not a Codex aspect, but it also isn't fully required to make the build function in the first place. It just boosts what it does a fair bit, making every landslide landslide pillar, strike an additional time and do a bit of bonus damage too. The main function of this is, as you'd expect, giving bonus hits to the landslides themselves. Bonus hits means bonus crits, which means faster resets on Poison Creeper. Then for our final offensive aspect, this is where I would put Trampled Earth.
If I had one! Sorry.
Instead, for now, I've got the accelerating aspect on the gloves, which makes core skills with critical hits increase your general attack speed by up to 25% for 5 seconds. We constantly hit with core skill crits, and so this is active a ton. Attack speed is important for us, so this does help a really fair amount. Then on my boots, I just sort of have the new Audacity aspect. I'd realistically recommend the Craven aspect if you have it, but Audacity definitely isn't bad either, given that it boosts one of our Malignant Hearts as well. This just stuns nearby enemies once every 20 seconds. It's not too big, but it is nice to have. Then on the helmet, we have the aspect of Mending Stone to increase the duration of Earthen Bulwark by 6 seconds. That ability is 3 seconds by default, so this effectively triples how long that it lasts, and the main reason that we want that, aside from the fact that having a barrier is convenient defensively, is that this also extends the duration of the unstoppable buff that it gives you, meaning that we can be immune to crowd control effects much longer and much more frequently. The only way that you'll really die in this build, generally with all the healing on hit that we have with Shred, is if you get crowd controlled long enough. On our chest, we've got Disobedience. This was nerfed recently, but it's still really good. It's still hard not to use even now. Bonus armor is just really strong. You want to get it if you can. Then on my pants, I have the aspect of the Crowded Sage. This is just what happened to drop for me. It's not a purposeful choice, but it provides a small bit of healing that I don't mind when enemies are close. It's not bad enough for me to actually replace it myself in my own build. Instead, the ones that I would recommend if you are aiming for the stars would be the Vigorous aspect for damage reduction while in werewolf form, or the aspect of Might for damage reduction after hitting with a basic skill. Both of those apply to this build constantly and are very defensively strong. As for your Malignant Hearts, this is where it gets quite fun. You are allowed to equip only one Wrathful Heart at a time, sadly, which we didn't know before the season happened, but the one that we've got here is massive for this build, being Creeping Death. This increases my damage over time effects, meaning poison, by 37.5% multiplicative for every separate crowd control effect that is on a target. This includes slows, immobilize, stuns, all of that, and we have ways of applying all 3 of those. Poison Creeper itself applies immobilize by default and also slows thanks to our passive that makes poison slow things. So this is essentially just a massive poison damage boost. On top of this, it just increases poison damage on unstoppable enemies as well as staggered bosses by 32%, which again is quite large. This is just the perfect Wrathful Heart for this build, to put it quite simply. Then you want the Heart of the Pakana, which charges enemies that are critically hit, and then any damage done to a charged enemy fires a ball of lightning to any nearby charged enemies for a decent pop of damage. We crit constantly and widely, so this just creates a field of lightning damage constantly popping off. Then finally we have the Revenge Heart. This reduces incoming damage by 14% on my roll, and then whenever you use a defensive skill, which is Earthen Bulwark and Blood Howl for us, it increases the suppressed damage by 250% and releases it as an explosion around you to deal damage. So this is both a significant damage reduction and also a damaging tool, which is why it's one of the best hearts that they've added by far for pretty much every build, honestly. As for general stats, as this is a level 50 build, I won't go crazy specific, but know that you want ranks of Poison Creeper on your helmet if you can. You want ranks of Shred or ranks of Landslide would be nice, but prioritize Shred over it if you have the choice between 2 pairs of gloves, one with each. Crit chance is absolutely massive, really high priority. Attack speed is great, then damage with poison, damage with companion skills, ranks to Call of the Wild passive, things like that are all impressive as well. If you have gem slots in your armor, feel free to stick in a topaz to reduce damage done to you while you are crowd controlled, as again, that's our main worry, is the main danger, and in your weapon you would want emeralds to increase crit damage to vulnerable enemies. With that then, let's move on to our Paragon board. At this early stage in the game, we don't need the damage reduction so much as we need the damage itself, so take the right path here up through the glyph socket in the middle, and the one that you most want in here is actually the exploit glyph for the bonus to vulnerable damage. I do not have that one yet myself, so instead I have the territorial glyph slotted in for boosted damage against close enemies. This is still a very high value glyph effect, so it's not that bad to have in, but exploit is the ideal one that you want first. From there you want to pick up enough dexterity in the area to activate the secondary effect of your glyph. I've just skipped over that myself so that I can get to the next board with my limited points to actually show you my plans. Of course, head up the other damage increase on the left side through the rare node, and then to the board attachment gate. Here you want to stick on the Heightened Malice board in its default rotation. Head up the left to get to the glyph socket, and here you want to slot in, well, another exploit or territorial, the 2 glyphs that I already mentioned. Whichever one isn't in your first board, you should have in your second board here. After that, you want to travel diagonally through the center of the board to get this rare node, which is actually really strong strong for us, and then eventually end up at the legendary node itself, which is a 45% damage increase multiplier while there are 3 or more poisoned enemies around you. Of course, this instantly triggers with Poison Creeper, so it is very, very strong in this build, especially if you can get it relatively early on. You might even consider flipping the board upside down and focusing on this upgrade before the Glyph Socket. I need more points personally before I can mess with that option and work it out in practice though. And that's it as far as what you need and what to do to put together the build itself. So how do you properly play it? What are the tips that I have? Well, you want to use Blood Howl more for spirit generation than anything else. Earthen Bulwark is more of an oh shit button. If you start taking too much damage or get hit by hard crowd control, use Earthen Bulwark to break out of it and protect yourself. Other than that, you want to walk into the middle of a big pack of enemies and sort of just drag them together to collect them. Hit Poison Creeper and then watch them all die. If they live and Poison Creeper's landslides reset the cooldown of it, just keep pressing Poison Creeper. If it didn't reset the cooldown, use Shred to amplify the poison damage with Blurred Beast and get more chances at a reset for Poison Creeper. If you don't have the spirit for Shred, use Storm Strike to build it up. On larger packs, groups of elites, or bosses, you want to use Petrify just before popping Poison Creeper, as stuns increase your poison damage within this build by almost 40%. And that's it. It's that simple. This build isn't really difficult to play, mostly just focus on if Poison Creeper is resetting and mash the button if it does, because it is just so damn powerful in this setup. I really enjoy playing this build, honestly. I love when a new aspect that's added to the game actually results in something different and powerful. And while this isn't quite at the level of the proper high-end Poison Shred endgame builds as far as speed goes, the fact that we can be this strong in the low 50s without a single unique item is absolutely incredible to me, especially because as a druid, it can be quite rough early on. I hope you've enjoyed this video, I hope you enjoyed this build if you try it out for yourself, and I wish you luck collecting the pieces to do so. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.